Jesus revealed the only way to silence the dark thoughts taking over your mind. Your mind has been exhausted for so long that you barely recognize what peace feels like anymore. You smile around people, you answer messages, you try to continue your routine. But deep inside, something feels wrong. The silence of the night has become dangerous because the moment everything gets quiet, the dark thoughts return louder than ever. Thoughts telling you that you are failing. Thoughts telling you that nothing will change. Thoughts convincing you that you are alone. Thoughts pushing fear into your chest before you even open your eyes in the morning. And the most frightening part is this: you have prayed before, yet the battle inside your mind keeps returning. But what if the real problem is not simply stress, anxiety, or emotional exhaustion? What if there is a spiritual reason why your thoughts feel heavier every day? Jesus never ignored the hidden battles happening inside the human mind. In the Gospel of Matthew chapter 11, he spoke directly to exhausted souls when he said, "Come to me, all who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." Not temporary distraction, not fake motivation, real rest. Because Jesus understood something most people still do not understand today. A mind disconnected from the voice of God becomes vulnerable to fear, confusion, and spiritual darkness. The enemy does not always attack your body first. Sometimes he attacks your thoughts, quietly, patiently, until your own mind starts speaking against you. That is why tonight's message may change something deep inside you forever. Because Jesus revealed the only way to silence the dark thoughts taking over your mind. And most people spend their entire lives searching for peace without ever discovering it. But before this video ends, you will understand why your mind has been under attack, why the darkness becomes stronger when you feel emotionally weak, and what Jesus said you must do before those thoughts completely consume your peace. And the final truth may explain why your soul has been feeling so tired lately. Your mind never became dark overnight. The darkness inside your mind did not appear in a single moment. It happened slowly, one disappointment at a time, one silent wound at a time, one night of emotional exhaustion after another. At first, the thoughts seemed harmless. Small fears, small doubts, small insecurities you tried to ignore. But over time, those thoughts began building a prison inside your own mind. And now you overthink everything. You replay conversations. You imagine worst-case scenarios. You feel emotionally drained even when nothing physically difficult happened during the day, because the real battle is happening inside you. Most people do not realize that repeated negative thoughts slowly reshape the condition of the soul. What you constantly feed your mind eventually begins controlling your emotions, your decisions, and even your faith. That is why the enemy fights so hard for your attention. If he cannot destroy your purpose directly, he will try to exhaust your mind until you lose the strength to keep believing. The frightening part is that dark thoughts often sound personal. They sound like your own voice. You will never change. You are too broken. God is silent because he abandoned you. You are fighting alone. But those thoughts were never sent to heal you. They were sent to weaken you. In the Gospel of John chapter 10 verse 10, Jesus warned that the thief comes only to steal, kill, and destroy. Many people think this attack only happens in visible ways, but sometimes the first thing the enemy steals is your peace. He steals your clarity, your hope, your emotional strength, until eventually you begin surviving instead of truly living. And maybe that is exactly where you are right now. Tired of fighting your own thoughts. Tired of pretending you are okay. Tired of carrying fears you cannot explain to anyone else. But Jesus revealed something powerful that most people overlook. Darkness grows strongest in isolation. The moment you start believing you must fight this battle completely alone is the moment your mind becomes even more vulnerable to fear. And in the next part, you will understand why loneliness becomes one of the enemy's most dangerous weapons against the human mind. The most dangerous thoughts arrive when you feel alone. There is a reason the darkest thoughts usually appear when nobody else is around. Late at night, inside your room, during silent moments, after emotional disappointment, after rejection, After another exhausting day where you pretended to be stronger than you really are. Loneliness changes the atmosphere of the mind. The moment a person begins feeling emotionally isolated, fear becomes louder, doubt becomes heavier, and suddenly the mind starts creating conversations that were never planted by God. That is why some people can stand in a crowded room and still feel completely abandoned inside. Because isolation is not always physical. Sometimes it is spiritual. You stop talking about your pain. You hide your emotional exhaustion. You convince yourself nobody would understand what is happening inside your head. And slowly, your thoughts become your only company. That is where the danger begins. Because the human mind was never created to survive disconnected from truth, peace, and the presence of God. Without spiritual protection, fear starts speaking with authority. The enemy understands this very well. If he can isolate you emotionally, he can influence your thoughts more easily. If he can keep you silent, he can keep you mentally trapped. If he can convince you that God is distant, your fear becomes even stronger. This is why so many people smile publicly while secretly fighting mental battles nobody sees. But Jesus never abandoned isolated people. In the Gospel of Mark chapter 4, while the disciples panicked during the violent storm, Jesus remained calm inside the boat. The storm outside reflected the panic growing inside their minds. And maybe that is exactly what is happening to you now. Your external life may look normal to others, but internally your thoughts feel like a storm that never stops moving. Fear, overthinking, mental exhaustion, emotional heaviness. You keep asking yourself why peace disappears so quickly. But Jesus showed something powerful during that storm. The disciples thought they were going to die because they focused more on the storm than on who was inside the boat with them. And many people are doing the same thing right now with their thoughts. They are listening more to fear than to God, more to anxiety than to truth, more to darkness than to the voice of Jesus. But everything begins changing when you realize you are not actually fighting alone. And the next truth may explain why your mind keeps returning to the same destructive thoughts no matter how hard you try to escape them. Your mind repeats what your soul believes most. Many people try to silence dark thoughts without ever confronting the deeper wound feeding them. That is why the battle keeps returning. You can distract yourself temporarily. You can stay busy. You can force positive thoughts for a few hours. But eventually the darkness comes back because the real problem was never only in the mind. It was hidden inside the soul. A wounded soul creates fearful thinking. A rejected soul creates insecure thinking. An exhausted soul creates hopeless thinking. And after enough pain, the mind starts repeating those emotions so often that they begin feeling like absolute truth. This is why some people constantly expect rejection, even when nobody rejected them. Why some expect failure before they even try. Why some wake up already emotionally tired before the day even begins. Their mind has been trained by pain. The enemy knows that if he can shape what you believe about yourself, he can influence the direction of your entire life, because eventually your thoughts stop sounding temporary. They start becoming your identity. I am broken. I will never heal. I will never have peace. God probably gave up on me. But Jesus never spoke to people according to their brokenness. He spoke to them according to who they could become through him. When others saw shame, Jesus saw restoration. When others saw weakness, Jesus saw transformation. When others saw failure, Jesus saw purpose. That is why the voice of Jesus sounds completely different from the voice of darkness. Darkness condemns. Jesus restores. Darkness traps you in fear. Jesus calls you into peace. In the Epistle to the Romans chapter 12, Scripture says to be transformed by the renewing of your mind. That means true healing begins when your mind stops feeding on fear and starts feeding on truth. Because whatever controls your thoughts eventually controls your emotions. And whatever controls your emotions eventually controls your decisions. This is why some people stay trapped in cycles they desperately want to escape. Their mind has been hearing fear for so long that peace now feels unfamiliar. And maybe that explains why you struggle to rest even during quiet moments. Why your thoughts keep racing. Why you feel mentally tired all the time. Your soul has been starving for the voice of God while feeding constantly on fear, anxiety, disappointment, and emotional pain. But Jesus revealed something most people never realize until it is almost too late. Not every voice inside your mind deserves your trust. And the next part may completely change the way you see the battle happening inside your thoughts. Not every thought inside your mind is telling you the truth. One of the most dangerous mistakes a person can make is believing every thought that enters their mind. Because thoughts can lie. Fear lies, shame lies, anxiety lies, darkness lies. But when emotional exhaustion becomes heavy enough, those lies start sounding believable. That is why some people spend years trapped inside invisible mental prisons they never realized were built from deception. The enemy does not always destroy people through obvious attacks. Sometimes he destroys them through constant mental whispers. You are beyond healing. Nothing will ever change. You are too weak. You are too far from God now. And if those thoughts repeat long enough, they begin shaping your emotional reality. This is exactly why Jesus constantly spoke about truth. In the Gospel of John chapter 8, Jesus said, "You shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free." Freedom begins when lies lose their authority inside your mind. But many people unknowingly give darkness authority every single day. They rehearse fearful thoughts, replay painful memories, expect disaster before anything even happens. Imagine rejection before speaking. Prepare emotionally for abandonment before love even has a chance to stay. And slowly the mind becomes conditioned for suffering. That is why peace feels impossible for some people. Their mind has spent years preparing for pain instead of trusting God. The frightening part is this: your thoughts create emotional momentum. The more fear you entertain, the stronger fear becomes. The more hopelessness you rehearse, the heavier your soul feels. The more darkness you agree with, the harder it becomes to recognize truth. And eventually, a person no longer knows the difference between their real identity and the lies they have repeated for years. But Jesus never asked people to agree with fear. He asked them to trust him even while fear was still present. That changes everything. Because real faith is not pretending dark thoughts do not exist. Real faith is refusing to crown those thoughts as the final authority over your life. And maybe that is the battle happening inside you right now. Part of you wants peace. Part of you feels trapped in fear. Part of you still believes God can heal your mind. But another part feels exhausted from fighting thoughts that never seem to stop. Yet Jesus revealed that freedom begins the moment you stop feeding darkness with agreement. And in the next part, you will understand why some thoughts become spiritually stronger the more attention you give them. The thoughts you feed become the thoughts that control you. Your mind grows in the direction of your attention. This is why fear becomes stronger when you constantly focus on worst-case scenarios. Why anxiety becomes heavier when your thoughts never stop rehearsing disaster. Why hopelessness grows when your soul keeps feeding on emotional darkness every day. Whatever you repeatedly meditate on eventually shapes your inner world. And most people never notice this process happening until peace has already disappeared from their life. They wake up checking fear first, sleeping with fear last, living emotionally exhausted between both moments. Their mind never rests because it has been trained to survive in panic. But Jesus never created you to live imprisoned by mental torment. In the Gospel of Matthew chapter 6, Jesus warned people not to live consumed by worry about tomorrow. Not because problems are fake, but because fear steals the strength needed for today. That is exactly what dark thoughts do. They drain emotional energy before the battle even begins. They create imaginary suffering. They convince your mind to live inside problems that may never even happen. And after enough repetition, fear stops feeling temporary. It starts feeling normal. This is why some people cannot enjoy peaceful moments anymore. Even during calm seasons, their mind keeps searching for danger, searching for rejection, searching for disappointment, because darkness trained them to expect pain everywhere. The enemy understands something many people ignore. Attention is spiritual. Whatever constantly occupies your thoughts slowly gains influence over your emotions, your reactions, and your spiritual condition. If your mind feeds continuously on fear, fear grows. If your mind feeds continuously on bitterness, bitterness grows. If your mind feeds continuously on hopelessness, despair begins taking root deep inside the soul. But the opposite is also true. When your mind begins feeding on the words of Jesus, something slowly changes inside you. Peace begins returning, clarity begins returning, strength begins returning. Not instantly, but steadily, because truth weakens darkness little by little. This is why the enemy fights so hard to keep people distracted, overwhelmed, emotionally drained, and spiritually disconnected. A distracted mind becomes easier to influence. And maybe that explains why your thoughts become loudest during moments when you are farthest from prayer, truth, rest, and the presence of God. But Jesus revealed something that completely changes the battle inside the human mind. Peace is not found by controlling every thought. Peace is found by surrendering your mind to the right voice. And the next part may reveal why so many people pray for peace while still remaining mentally trapped inside fear. Many people ask God for peace while still listening to fear. Some people pray for peace at night, then spend the entire day feeding the exact thoughts destroying their peace. They ask God to calm their mind while constantly agreeing with fear internally. That is why the battle never fully disappears. Because peace cannot grow inside a mind that keeps surrendering to darkness every day. Jesus understood that transformation requires more than emotional moments. It requires spiritual realignment. Many people want God to remove anxiety instantly while continuing to meditate on fear constantly. They want emotional healing while refusing to release the lies they secretly believe about themselves. They want rest while mentally carrying every burden alone. But peace does not enter a mind that refuses to let go of fear. In the Epistle to the Philippians, chapter 4, Scripture says to think about whatever is true, honorable, pure, lovely, and worthy of praise. That instruction was never random, because what occupies your mind eventually shapes your spiritual atmosphere, and this is where many people lose the battle. They unknowingly build entire mental environments dominated by negativity, fear, comparison, guilt, rejection, and emotional heaviness. Then they wonder why peace feels distant. Your mind cannot heal while constantly consuming darkness, and the modern world feeds darkness continuously. Bad news, comparison, fear, pressure, addiction to overthinking, constant emotional noise. The soul becomes overwhelmed, the mind becomes exhausted, and eventually a person cannot even hear the voice of God clearly anymore because anxiety has become louder than truth. Maybe that is exactly what has been happening to you. You still believe in God. You still pray sometimes. But internally your thoughts feel chaotic. You feel spiritually tired, emotionally heavy, mentally restless, and part of you fears that peace may never fully return again. But Jesus never told people to carry life alone. In the Gospel of Matthew chapter 11, he said, "Come to me all who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." Notice what he did not say. He did not say, "Figure it out alone. Pretend to be strong. Silence your pain by yourself." No. Jesus invites exhausted minds to come closer, not farther away. That means your healing begins the moment you stop hiding your mental exhaustion from God. Because darkness survives through secrecy, but healing begins through surrender. And the next truth may explain why some people stay trapped in mental torment for years, while others finally break free and experience real peace again. Real freedom begins when you stop fighting this battle alone. Many people are losing the battle inside their mind because they keep trying to defeat darkness using only human strength. They hide their pain, suppress their emotions, pretend they are okay, smile while internally collapsing. But private suffering becomes extremely dangerous when the soul has no place to release its burdens. The longer pain stays trapped inside you, the heavier your thoughts become. And eventually, exhaustion reaches a level where even simple daily life starts feeling difficult. You wake up tired. You overthink constantly. You feel emotionally numb around people. You lose motivation. You lose clarity. Sometimes you even lose the ability to feel hope the way you once did. And the frightening part is that many people normalize this condition for years. They survive, but they no longer feel alive. Jesus never intended for the human soul to carry this weight alone. In the Gospel of Luke chapter 8, there was a man living completely consumed by torment, isolated, broken, mentally overwhelmed. Everyone around him believed he was beyond restoration, but Jesus saw something different. Where others saw a lost mind, Jesus saw someone who still needed freedom. That is important, because your current mental battle is not your final identity. Your anxiety is not your identity. Your dark thoughts are not your identity. Your emotional exhaustion is not your identity. The enemy wants you to believe your condition will never change because hopelessness weakens resistance. Hopeless people stop fighting. Hopeless people stop praying. Hopeless people slowly surrender to darkness internally. But Jesus specializes in restoring what looks impossible to heal. The problem is that many people wait until total emotional collapse before finally surrendering their mind fully to God. They trust fear longer than they trust Jesus. They rehearse pain longer than they meditate on truth. They carry burdens Jesus already asked them to release. And slowly their mind becomes addicted to survival mode. Maybe that explains why rest feels unnatural to you now. Even during peaceful moments, your thoughts still search for danger. Your emotions still prepare for disappointment. Your soul still feels restless. Because your nervous system learned how to survive fear, but it forgot how to live in peace. Yet Jesus revealed something powerful. Peace does not come from controlling life perfectly. Peace comes from trusting the one who remains greater than the storm inside your mind. And in the next part, you will discover the spiritual shift that finally silences the chaos taking over your thoughts. The moment your mind changes is the moment your spirit stops agreeing with darkness. The greatest spiritual shift happens when you finally realize that not every thought deserves your agreement. This is where many people remain trapped for years. They hear fearful thoughts and immediately believe them. They feel anxiety and instantly assume disaster is coming. They experience emotional heaviness and conclude that God must be distant. But feelings are not always truth. Sometimes your soul is simply exhausted from carrying too much fear for too long. Jesus revealed that freedom begins when truth becomes louder than darkness. That does not mean the negative thoughts disappear instantly. It means they lose authority over your identity. This changes the entire battle. Because before healing happens externally, something must first change internally. You stop agreeing with hopelessness. You stop feeding constant fear. You stop surrendering emotionally to every dark thought entering your mind. Instead, you begin replacing those thoughts with truth. When fear says, "You are alone," you remember that in the Gospel of Matthew chapter 28, Jesus said, "I am with you always." When anxiety says, "You will never overcome this," you remember that in the Epistle to the Philippians chapter 4, Scripture says, "I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me." When darkness says, "You are too broken now," you remember that Jesus still restored people everyone else gave up on. This is how spiritual resistance begins. Not through pretending the battle is easy, but through refusing to let darkness define who you are. And slowly, your inner atmosphere starts changing. The mind that once produced constant panic begins learning peace again. The soul that once expected rejection begins recognizing the presence of God again. The heart that once felt emotionally suffocated begins breathing again spiritually. This is why prayer becomes so powerful. Prayer is not only asking God for things. Prayer reconnects your mind to the voice that fear tried to replace. Every moment spent in God's presence weakens the lies darkness planted inside you. And maybe that is why the enemy fights so hard to keep you distracted, mentally overwhelmed, emotionally exhausted, and spiritually distant. Because a person who truly reconnects with the voice of Jesus becomes harder to control through fear. But there is one final truth Jesus revealed about peace that most people never fully understand. And once you understand it, the way you fight dark thoughts may never be the same again. Peace begins when Jesus becomes the loudest voice in your life. The mind will always follow the voice it listens to most. If fear becomes the loudest voice, your life slowly fills with anxiety. If shame becomes the loudest voice, your soul slowly collapses under guilt. If darkness becomes the loudest voice, even peaceful moments start feeling unsafe. But when the voice of Jesus becomes stronger than the chaos inside your mind, something begins changing deep within you. Not because life suddenly becomes perfect, not because every problem disappears overnight, but because your spirit finally stops fighting alone. This is the peace Jesus spoke about in the Gospel of John chapter 14 when he said, "Peace I leave with you, my peace I give you. I do not give to you as the world gives." The world offers temporary distractions. Jesus offers inner restoration. The world teaches people to escape pain. Jesus teaches people to walk through the storm without losing their soul. That is why true peace cannot be built only on circumstances. If your peace depends on everything going perfectly, your mind will constantly live in fear of losing control. But the peace of Jesus remains, even when life feels uncertain. That peace guards the heart, guards the mind, guards the soul against complete collapse. And maybe this is the moment your spirit needed more than anything. Not another distraction, not another temporary emotional escape, but a real encounter with truth. Because you were never created to live imprisoned by tormenting thoughts every day. You were not created to wake up already exhausted emotionally. You were not created to carry silent battles completely alone. You were not created to spend your life drowning in fear while pretending to be okay around everyone else. Jesus sees the battle happening inside your mind. He sees the nights you cannot rest, the moments you feel mentally overwhelmed, the silent tears nobody else notices, the emotional exhaustion you keep hiding from people. And still he is calling you closer instead of pushing you away. That is what makes his love different. Darkness condemns weakness. Jesus moves toward weakness with compassion. And tonight, maybe the real battle was never simply about anxiety, fear, or overthinking. Maybe your soul has been desperately searching for the voice of God in the middle of all the noise inside your mind. Because when Jesus becomes the loudest voice in your life, darkness finally starts losing its power over your thoughts. Tonight you may have realized something that changes the way you see your mind forever. The battle inside you is real. The exhaustion, the fear, the overthinking, the heaviness you feel when the room becomes quiet, the dark thoughts that keep returning when nobody else is around. Jesus sees all of it. He sees the mental battles you hide behind your smile. He sees the emotional weight you carry silently every day. He sees the moments you feel spiritually tired and emotionally overwhelmed. And most importantly, he knows you were never meant to fight this battle alone. For too long, fear has been speaking louder than truth inside your mind. Too long listening to anxiety. Too long agreeing with hopelessness. Too long carrying burdens that slowly drained your peace. But tonight, something can begin changing. Not because your life suddenly becomes easy, but because your soul finally remembers where real peace comes from. Jesus never promised a life without storms. He promised his presence in the middle of them. That means even now, while your thoughts still feel heavy, while your emotions still feel exhausted, while your mind still feels restless, God has not abandoned you. He is closer than you think. The enemy wanted you isolated, silent, emotionally exhausted, spiritually weak, mentally trapped inside fear. Because darkness grows stronger when a person starts believing there is no hope left. But Jesus is still calling your name through the noise inside your mind. And maybe this video was not an accident. Maybe your soul needed this reminder before the darkness convinced you to give up emotionally. Maybe God wanted you to hear this before fear completely consumed your peace. Maybe this is the moment your healing finally begins. Not through pretending you are strong, but through surrendering your exhausted mind to the one who understands every hidden battle inside you. In the Gospel of John chapter 16, Jesus said, "In this world, you will have trouble, but take heart. I have overcome the world." That includes the storm inside your mind. So tonight before you sleep, stop carrying everything alone for one moment. Talk to God honestly. Not perfectly. Honestly. Tell him about the fear. Tell him about the exhaustion. Tell him about the thoughts you have been too afraid to admit. Because the moment you stop hiding your pain from Jesus is often the exact moment healing quietly begins. And if this message spoke directly to your soul, Write in the comments, Jesus, bring peace to my mind. Sometimes one honest prayer becomes the beginning of complete transformation.